This? Really? This is what people are considering to be the best in the franchise? If that be the case, then the future of filmmaking is cooked. Before I start digging into this trash heap, please, if you enjoy what you hear in this video, then like and subscribe to help build this kingdom. Predator BADlands, copyright 20th Century Fox Studios, follows our main character and runt of the litter, Dek. The movie opens on Yautja Prime, the homeworld of the Predators, as Dek is currently tracking his brother Qui to a cave so that they can test each other in combat. After the training and subsequent loss, Dek is still honored with the opportunity to go out on a hunt, to which, in order to prove himself to both he and his father, he chooses Genna, known as the Death Planet, because basically every Yautja that's ever gone there has never returned. It's at this point that their Father of the Year pulls up and asks Qui why Dek is still alive. Capturing Dek in some sort of stasis trap, Qui is ordered to kill his younger brother. Instead, Qui destroys the trap and throws Dek into the ship and starts fighting his father. After being made to never clap again, Qui sacrifices himself to press the button in order to send Dek in his ship all the way out to Genna to at least give him a fighting chance. After watching his brother get French revolutioned in front of him, Dek now has the anger and determination to travel to Genna and defeat the Kalisk. The Kalisk is a massive creature that no other Yautja has ever defeated, and one that even their father fears. After crashing on Genna, Dek gathers all of his equipment, but just like a game of Tarkov, he's nearly picked off before he's able to get out of there. After fighting through a series of Biolante's vines, he escapes with nothing but his plasma sword. Yep, that's right, Yautja are basically just Jedi now. Anyway, the mandibled Padawan makes his way away from the forest and into a field full of exploding seeds. Yeah, no kidding, these seeds have proximity detonation. You come anywhere near them, they pop, and they shoot you with seeds, and the seeds are tranquilizers, but you don't know that just yet, because that information and a little bit more is explained by Thea, who is currently hanging out inside of a nest from a big predator hovering over Dek. She explains all of this using a universal translator. It's not uncommon for sci-fi to use this, but there's a catch to it which I'll discuss later in the discussion. Anyway, the needles are tranquilizers, and while you're napping, the vulture's going up your ass with its head. Very simple. She convinces him to send her one of his glaives so that she can cut herself out of this situation and help him in his predicament. A predicament that he understands his life is on the line for, so instead of just tossing her the glaive by going around the field, the fucking moron runs straight through it. He tosses her the glaive just in time before the vulture is about to come down upon him, and then she tackles the fucking thing out of nowhere. Boy, did I call that shot from a mile away when I first reviewed the trailer some time ago. Anyway, sometime later he wakes up and Thea starts explaining the situation. Her and her team of synths came down to the planet looking for the Kalisk, coincidentally what he's trying to hunt, and they got slaughtered. And as he picks her up and we discover, someone ate the whole damn cake. Nah, just kidding. She got bishoped some time ago, and her sister, Tessa, managed to save her right before something happened to both of them. So with his physical prowess and her knowledge, the two of them set off to go and reunite her legs and hopefully take on the Kalisk successfully. And in their adventures across Genna, we come across multiple different things. You got a worm that spits acid. There are exploding grubs, which if you touch them, they get really pissed off and they explode like a grenade. I'm not kidding. And the entire time, Thea will not shut the fuck up. Camping out on this first night, Thea goes on to explain that both she and her sister Tessa are exactly that. They are sisters, as she perceives, and they were both sent here to this planet with the synths to try and capture life forms. She gives this long spiel about everything like it's Genos talking to Saitama, and she even puts Dek to sleep. I'm not kidding. The movie literally agrees with me. And the next day, what they come across are razor grass fields. Any other Magic the Gathering fans know of Mirrodin? Because that's literally what this is. And in the field is this really big monster that Dek wants to kill because he's hungry. It's called a bone bison. It's basically this giant armored elephant rhino thing. As Dek surveys the area, there's this little monkey thing that rolls through the grass and starts smashing it so that there's a path through the grass. It pisses off the bone bison, which starts going on a little bit of a rampage, and the two of them are also attacked by this giant tentacle monster thing up in the trees. So after Dek happens to save the little monkey thing, it in turn saves them when the giant squid in the tree is about to chow down on them. Dek kills both the giant squid thing and the bone bison with his discount lightsaber, and then that night they all camp out, and the little monkey thing has joined them. Thea nicknames the little monkey thing Bud, and then it spits on Dek because it's marking him as its ally. And then we get this really, really awkward, supposedly comedic take on the Jaws scene between Brody and his son. It's played up for laughs, never mind the deep meaning behind that one in that original movie, but sure, why not? The Yautja are just a fucking joke now. This is Dan Trachtenberg's third Predator movie, and we're already hitting parody levels of self-awareness. Remind me again how this guy is supposed to be hailed as some hero for the franchise? Continuing to yap, Thea reminisces about Tessa saving her, and Deck reinforces the point that she is her sister, and that is somehow treated as some grand revelation for Thea. Did I have a fucking stroke? You already understand her to be your sister. Why is this... Whatever, bad writing, moving on. Parallel to this, earlier in the day and at the point of camping, it turns out Tessa, the sister to Thea, has actually been found and repaired by one of the Weyland-Yutani systems. She's told that the Yautja is on the planet, and that it has Thea in her possession. How does the AI know anything about this being the case? Not a fucking clue, it's never answered, let's move on. At night, Tessa is shown to be trekking down the unlikely trio, and she actually comes across Quay's crashed ship. Like, Weyland-Yutani once again has full access to a Predator ship, and the only thing that Tessa decides to take is 2 ice grenades and the plasma caster. Yeah, no, the Yautja just have ice grenades, because apparently Dan Trachtenberg also knows about Doom Eternal. The next day, both Deck and Thea have now arrived at the last known location of the Kalisk, and strewn about is the remnants of the battle in which the Kalisk trashed all of the synth units. They find Thea's legs, and she begins to repair herself, and then just as Deck says this is going to be my moment of glory, Thea actually goes on to explain that she kind of hit the silent trigger to let everyone know that she's in this location, so they're all going to come and find her. Deck is understandably pissed at this, but he still goes to challenge the Kalisk anyway, even though Thea tells him he literally cannot beat it. Oddly vague warnings aside, the Kalisk is drawn in because Deck pulls an Arnold by making this big fire explosion and challenging it out with a roar. And immediately things start to go sideways, because Deck is getting tossed around like Betty White got into the boxing ring with in his prime Mike Tyson. In the middle of the mayhem, Thea's legs are separated from her body once again, which is played for laughs, and Deck, managing to get the upper hand with his discount lightsaber, beheads the Kalisk. Gee willikers, that was easy. Why isn't anybody able to defeat the Kalisk? Oh yeah, that's right, it can instantaneously regenerate its decapitated head to its body and come back into one piece. Okay, Thea, sweetheart, I get it, you're a glorified Pokedex. But I feel like withholding critical need-to-know information, that's kind of a dick move. It's a fucking stupid decision, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Anyway, Deck gets pinned down by the Kalisk a la Dragonheart style, and just as it's about to bite his head off, it stops for some unknown reason. Then suddenly, both the Kalisk and Deck are frozen with the ice grenade because Tessa and the synths have arrived. On the transport ship heading back towards the synth base, Deck understandably crashes out against Thea, believing that his hunt has been ruined and she betrayed him, yada yada yada. This is about when Tessa walks in. She starts scanning Deck for experimentation and dissection at a later time and finds that he's actually malformed. Yep, turns out he's not just a runt, he's actually kind of crippled. I totally see why his dad wanted to get rid of him now, because the Yautja are kind of Spartan in that mentality. Thea, pleading with Tessa, tries to explain that he isn't worth keeping around if he's malformed in order to get him out of danger. But Tessa isn't biting, as she explains both Thea and herself were given emotions to better manipulate the life forms of this planet, and that these emotions are weakness. Alright, just a few simple questions. Why would you give synths emotions? Until Deck arrived, which is a big convenience, there was literally nothing else on this planet you could even try to reason with, because everything here is trying to kill you, as she said.
Where everything is trying to kill you.
And why Thea and Tessa specifically? I get why for Thea, because that's a fourth wall break so that they can have an emotional connection between her and Deck, so that they can talk and she can continue to hold his hand and play fucking psychologist the entire time. But Tessa doesn't make any fucking sense. Why would you give a synth the ability to fear? That really is why she's doing it. She was threatened with decommission. It's right fucking here. This is asinine. The whole purpose behind Tessa's mission and everything else is just forced bullshit. If Weyland-Yutani has the resources to send out an entire army of synths to a planet to try and acquire these different life forms for medical research, why would you not turn them into Terminators? All of this forced drama and conflict could have been avoided had Weyland-Yutani just not been retarded and given robots emotions. It's bad writing being defended by people who choose to be contrarian. That's it. Let's just move on before I have an aneurysm. So Tessa leaves, another synth comes in, and Thea helps Dek escape by exploding another thing, a toy actually that he had from his brother, and Dek gets launched out the back of the shuttle because apparently none of these military synths can hit a target as big as a Yautja 10 feet in front of them. Separated from Thea, Dek is kinda distraught. He doesn't know what else to do, and then Bud shows up, and apparently this is where he just pieces together that Bud is actually the infant of the Kalisk. Boy, if I had a card for convenience, I'd be screaming bingo at this point. It's because Bud marked Dek that the Kalisk didn't rip his head off. It's in this moment that Dek has the epiphany that Thea, unlike him, has been 100% right the entire time. So Dek decides he's gonna grab up everything he can and do everything that Thea told him to do in order to come back and save her. He domesticates the acid-spitting worm, he gathers some of the exploding grubs, he makes some bone armor out of the bison, and with Bud by his side, the two set off to go and find the synth camp, wherever the hell that is, because they have no point of reference whatsoever for its direction. Meanwhile, Thea activates a tracker that's apparently up her own leg's ass, so the cake makes its way towards the bakery. At the encampment, Dek starts taking out these synths one at a time. Meanwhile, Thea manages to free herself and reconnects with her own ass. The two reunite, and now the camp decides to go on lockdown. Dek heads off to go and attack all of the synths, while Thea goes to free the Kalisk. So almost every single synth in this encampment lines up behind Dek, who then lets his worm spit on the grubs that he strategically planted, and the grubs all blow up in unison, taking out every single synth in one fell swoop. Yep, no kill order, no stun order, they all stand there, watch this happen, and get taken out in unison because nobody has the idea to maybe shoot first and ask questions later. Yeah, real good writing here, guys. Any more convenience interwoven into this thread, and this script could be sponsored by Charmin Ultra, because that's all it'll be good for, is wiping my ass. So, because this is a distantly related sequel, everything must be biggerer and betterer. Tessa is the final boss. She shows up in this giant version of the loader from Aliens, and she magicked the plasma caster into working off-screen. And then one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever seen in one of these movies. Tessa fires the caster at Dek, and in this brief moment, just as he's about to die, the acid-spitting worm has an epiphany that it loves its master so much that it's going to tank the shot for him. I'm not kidding, here it is in the blast, saving his life. Hi, Charmin? Yes, Albeleo here. I have a new product for you. One that is so effective that it's going to soak up enough shit to clean up the entirety of San Francisco. Are you in? Lord, give me strength. Anyway, the Kalisk shows up and there's a big fight between it and Tessa. But because it has plot armor thicker than a bowl of oatmeal, it ends up defeating and then devours Tessa. After the group convenes to catch their breath after a hard-fought victory, the Kalisk freezes from the inside and explodes. Yep, Tessa used the ice grenade as a suppository and shattered the Kalisk from the inside with the plasma caster. Pump the fucking brakes. The Yautja have had a weapon that could defeat the Kalisk the entire time and no one ever thought to use it? Fuck me, is Dek being malformed physically the only limitation, or are all of the Yautja so mentally retarded they couldn't figure out to use the ice grenade on the regenerative alien? Whatever, so they kill Tessa and everyone's happy. Sometime later, they eventually go back to Yautja Prime. Dek presents Tessa's skull and says he wants what he is owed, that being the cloaking device his dad has. His dad says "nuh-uh" and attacks him with two of his bodyguards. After some badly choreographed martial arts and a few poses, Dek kills both the bodyguards and then ultimately beats his dad into submission. With what lessons? Not a fucking clue, cause Dek barely ever used those on Genna. Then Bud, being much bigger now, eats his dad's head. Then, just as the rest of the clan steps out to make battle with Dek, Thea, and Bud, a ship starts speeding down the way towards them. Thea asks if that's a bad thing, and Dek basically ends the movie with, "Nope, that's Mom." And then the movie ends. There's so many problems to go over. It's like dealing with Alien Romulus all over again. I never really thought I would get into something like this, but yeah, let's talk about the texture. Unlike Prey, there is no more grit, texture or anything that feels environmental or even remotely real. The original Predator felt sweaty and rugged, like you were actually a soldier in those jungles. Predator 2 felt dirty and dusty, like you were inhaling brake dust from all of the cars on the roads. AVP, while a little too clean for my liking, was definitely enough to make you feel isolated and cold in that Antarctic environment. Hell, even AVPR made me feel like I could chafe because they dumped enough water on the people in that movie to solve the drought crisis in Ethiopia. But Badlands is... it's sterile MCU CGI slop. You never really feel wet, muddy, cold, sweaty, or anything. This isn't to say that there weren't shots that were done on set or at location or anything, sure, but my goodness, with all of the filters that they have layered over everything, it loses all of its texture. It's like all of those unnecessarily glossy effects that they smother Dragon Ball Super in. Seriously, compare this side by side. Here's Predator Badlands and literally any MCU movie, and it all looks the same. And not only this, but if you happen to look around, you'll notice there's very little in the way of real color. Obviously there's some, but my goodness, the contrasts are practically non-existent. And that's again because everything has this really ugly gray filter over everything. I'm not saying color is the only thing I want in a Predator movie, but my goodness, can we have some? Even supporting contrasting colors would be fantastic. Predator 2 made real good use of all of those blues contrasting the rust red of the city. So in terms of these superficial details, yeah, Predator Badlands looks like a modern-day McDonald's of the franchise. And in the same way those two superficial details are really dull, both the action and the gore are really tame. The biggest problem with much of the action is that it's way too choreographed. Because the vast majority of the fauna is all CGI in this movie, everyone performs as they are directed, but it really feels like everything was added in to work around how the actors are doing their stunts, instead of them being directed as though they were dealing with a real creature. So because of this, nothing feels like it has any weight. Like early on, when Deck is fighting all of the Evil Dead rape branches, he fucking cuts into one of them by charging into it with a sword, and then later when he escapes, he has to run up this line, but it's very obviously an object that he's just running along, but they put in the vines to make it seem like the vines stayed perfectly still for him to run along. And when the humanoid characters interact, it feels like you're watching the choreography from The Phantom Menace. It's all way too clean. Yautja are big brutes that want to square up with anything to test their mettle. If you earn the honor of getting pimp-slapped with their ring hand, they square up with you in a wide, short, squat stance. They look like they're wrestlers. But when Deck kills his father's two bodyguards, fuck, it's just rolls and kicks and punches and poses. The impact is further lessened by the lack of corn syrup on screen. What, did inflation make that impossible for Disney of all companies to buy? I'm not really a big fan of gore, but as long as it makes sense contextually, I suppose that's fine. But when you lay it on thicker than Lou Malnati's pizza sauce, I don't care, because it obviously is hiding your lack of a script with shit-tier things like Blood Sea or Terrifier. But this is why practical effects matter as much as they do. When you have a CGI monster get cut in half by a CGI weapon, which splatters CGI blood everywhere, I'm not left with a visceral impact and reaction, I'm just watching PS2 jelly blood everywhere. What does leave a reaction is watching the Predator clean off Billy's skull, or the wet crunch sound effects that back up King Willie's skull from Predator 2 being cleaned up in the spaceship. Or how about the ghoul getting his spinal column ripped out in Predators? One of the biggest criticisms of AVP all those years ago was that it had almost no gore in it. People wanted to see these creatures smash into each other like it was a kid playing with toys. This includes the human victims. And considering the only reason the movie got an unrated edition is because they added blood in post through CG. Audiences and fans alike wanted to see these creatures do what they are known to do, so when they didn't, it was kind of disappointing. But here we are with the latest movie in the franchise, and the Predator barely does any predatoring. Not having any human characters in the movie is just a technicality because they're all synths. This is why as long as the blood isn't red, it can be splattered all over the place. That's why you can see green or blue, or in the case of the synths, white blood all over the place. And again, it's mostly a cop-out because it's all CGI blood anyway. In this context, there's hardly a difference between the synths of BADlands and the Tertiary from Avengers. Hell, even the music isn't impressive. I didn't really want to hear anything recognizable outside of maybe the main Predator theme, but that's about it. However, I also really didn't want to hear any generic music that sounded like AI algorithm composed it either. Most fans should recognize the Alan Silvestri main theme from the original movie. The wood and string instruments contrasting the brass feels very much like the humans and Predator preparing for war. Or how about Herald Closer from AVP's soundtrack giving us Face to Face, where it feels genuinely like you're finally about to watch two titans duke it out. Or even the alien fight itself feeling tribal and desperate, like you can genuinely feel these two forces clashing. And then there's the BADlands OST by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wallfish. I don't hate it, it's just not impressive. I appreciate the deeper bass drums, the percussion is pretty solid, I suppose. But the high brass doesn't quite work, it feels more like something out of Dune. And what sounds like Mongolian chanting isn't bad, but then everything turns vocoded, and it's like, wait, why? What is happening? That's ironically probably the best feature about the theme. It matches the movie because the tone is such a mess. Now, one of the biggest problems I have with this movie is actually the world building. With the exception of the original, none of the Predator movies have closed their mandibles properly. The skin folds are always wrinkly or kind of wobbly and wavy because the material gets pulled apart. And I admit, because they're CGI, BADlands actually comes pretty close, but they're still not right. It's minor, but it bugs me. Although not as much as how Dek and Kui don't quite look like normal Yautja. The skulls are incorrect, they're supposed to be wider, flatter, and much taller. Also, the dreads are not supposed to come out from the top like a regular hairline, they're supposed to come out the side. So it's weird that this be the case because they look way too human. The movie agrees with me on this point because the father's head crest is much closer to what a Yautja should look like. But of course you're gonna have people that are like, you said he was malformed. Yeah, I know I said that he was malformed, but how does that also include Kui? It's like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. It's stupid because indirectly it canonizes the Predator because now they're on a spectrum. We have regular, feral, super, and tism. Also, so much for them having super advanced technology. Remember that tech city from AVP Requiem? Yeah, not anymore. Now they live in mud huts. Yeah, super advanced alien race that has intergalactic, faster-than-light traveling spaceships that humans cannot fathom. They've got cloaking technology, super punch-through concrete gauntlets, plasma casters, biomasks providing both breathable air, including numerous kinds of vision, such as infrared, electromagnetic, X-ray, light, and even sound vibrations, but they live in mud huts. And while I do appreciate that someone at least took a crack at the Yautja language, it does not work here. Yautja aren't supposed to be able to speak fluently with repeatable sounds. The Yautja do not have lips in the same way we do, but when you hear Dek speaking, he uses a lot of M and B and P kind of sounds. They don't use their tusks to speak. How do you think the Predator clicking happens? Even ignoring that, it doesn't matter because the sound effects that he makes are using his lips that he clearly shouldn't have. So the fact that Dek or anyone else sounds clear is nonsensical. Every time they open their mouth, it should just be like, ah, gah, 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 gah. Speaking of speaking, let's talk about Thea and her universal translator. I don't understand why she was given one but not Tessa. Again, they've been used throughout sci-fi for decades, but this one works very differently. This is needlessly convoluted. Thea specifies that when she speaks, what Dek hears is Yautja. but she very clearly speaks English. So, for example, when she's sitting there in front of Tessa talking to Dek because she's trying to help him escape, when she asks him, hey, is there something I can do to help, because I don't remember the exact dialogue, it should be very clear to Tessa what the fuck is happening. Just have Ellie Fanning learn the Yautja language. You already had it for 3 other actors, why not have her do it? It's disjointed and doesn't work. It's the same stupid thing the Solo movie came up with to explain Han just knowing Wookiee, but lazily just speaks English for audiences instead of committing to subtitles. And no, I don't really care for the argument that the movie supposedly takes place in the 24th or 25th century. You can't just magically change how sound waves work. Regardless of how advanced the technology is, there should be some level of limit here. But the only real limit that actually happens throughout the movie is just removing the equipment from the equation. That's part of what makes the Predator's new advanced technologies really jarring. Everything is just a plasma blade of some sort. You've got a bow that has a plasma string that generates an arrow somehow, but doesn't also damage Dek's hands when he pulls it. The glaive has a bit of plasma energy and actually kind of replaces the smart disc, which is kind of unfortunate. I really like the smart disc. The plasma sword can cut through, literally anything except for Yautja armor for some reason. I don't know, it's really inconsistent, but hey, Yautja have their own version of lightsabers now. And of course, the ice grenade, which is so powerful it can stop the Kalisk's regenerative capabilities. Actually, it just struck me in the middle of this, how the fuck did Tessa not freeze inside the Kalisk when she fired the grenade? Damn it! Chalk up another negative, I guess. Anyway, what's even really the point of introducing them, or let alone even having the older technologies exist if the newer ones are so much better? Sure, they replace the older technologies like the claws and the combi stick, but I can't help but feel these older technologies shouldn't even be present if the new ones are so much more advanced and better for hunting. And again, because the movie agrees with me, Dek goes through his own Metroid problem where he loses all of his equipment except for the bare essential, in this case, the sword. And with all of that out of the way, now I can discuss the characters. There is little to discuss with the majority of the cast. Dek's father is the evil catalyst for the events. Tessa is the opposite of Kui and just serves as the final boss. Kui himself is probably the best character, although he does fulfill his purpose, however short it is. And all of the synths are basically just glorified calculators. Bud, on the other hand, is a frustrating convenience. He's just a cute animal sidekick like so many before. The Minions, Steve, young Groot. His face even resembles a Porg's, you cannot argue this. And being a young Kalisk to save Dek at the end is fine because it is a minor detail with the screenwriting that actually brings an element back around for a payoff, but that's really about it. You could remove Bud entirely from the story, and instead of the Kalisk pausing when it's about to eat Dek because it recognizes the pheromones, you could just have Tessa freeze both of them before the Kalisk kills Dek, and it would serve the same purpose. The same outcome would be achieved. Now this brings me to the only two worth discussing, which are Dek and Thea. He's determined and egotistical like a Yautja should be. Great. And most of the time he refers to Thea as a tool, because she's really only along to fulfill his purpose. That was the deal they agreed on. However, many of his decisions clash with the character he is presented as. Defiantly challenging the Kalisk is just like Scar fighting the alien queen in AVP. That's totally fine. However, he's also shown to take advantage of knowledge and information that he learns, but then he immediately goes against that. Just like when he runs through the field of exploding seeds. It comes off as inconsistent. Not that he can't learn a lesson and change his ways, but in some of these examples, he has the knowledge already, but he still chooses to go against it. So overall, I would say Dek is fine. The same cannot be said about Thea. First off, she's annoying as shit and will not shut the fuck up. After the two agree to help each other, she just starts yapping over a montage.
What do I call you? How hot does the plasma blade get? How do you achieve sublight travel? You're awfully quiet. You're kind of short for a Yautja. Can I get your Insta?
And when Dek asks Thea about Genna because he wants information, she literally starts the sentence with,
well, it starts about 13.4 billion years ago.
Shut up! Shut the fuck up!
You have no right to take me
Shut
to
up! Will you shut up? Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
I I'm sorry, why is she allowed to speak this much? If everything on the planet is supposed to be trying to kill me, I would be as silent as the grave so nothing could hear me coming up behind it. All of this yapping just reminds me of Amanda Kirby using the blowhorn from Jurassic Park 3. She's a complete moron and withholds information unnecessarily. Deck wants to challenge the Callisk, but she doesn't tell him that it can instantly regenerate. As I said earlier, Thea describes Tessa as her sister, and then she gets reminded of this later, and now it's some sort of grand revelation. She also conveniently knows that the exploding seeds not only are tranquilizers, but she also doesn't tell Deck that until after he's stung? How long were you in the nest? That speaks to a bigger issue because there are a ton of conveniences around her. Based on the movie's progression, the Vulture's nest is several days away from where they last engaged the Callisk. And the Weyland-Yutani base is even further than that because they were traveling there by transport. So when Deck goes to gather all of his equipment and resources on foot, it would have taken several days, possibly a week to do so. So why did it take so long for the synths not to leave the planet with the Callisk that they came for? Also, how did Thea launch herself to tackle the Vulture without legs? And how much does she weigh? Ripley casually carried Bishop's remains in Alien 3, but this Vulture was brought down by Thea? Does the Vulture have the molecular density of aerogel? What's going on here? It's like claiming a squirrel could shoulder tackle a bald eagle. And there's so many more, too. It's like Thea's legs can see and fight without a visual system, probably because she has a camera up her snatch, I guess. Thea is the only synth that happens to have a universal translator. And the only reason she has emotions is so that Trachtenberg felt justified in making her both manipulate and feel guilty for doing so to Deck. It's completely unnecessary because previous synths like Bishop never needed them to speak casually with humans or to deceive in the cases of David and Ash. It's so stupid because when she's playing psychologist because Deck says that his brother is dead and then she tells us, the audience, "Oh, your brother's dead? That means you're grieving." It just makes me want to fucking pluck my ears out. And that's not including all of the other conveniences and questions to bring up, like why is the Callisk still in the area after wiping out the synths? Why did Tessa only take 2 of the ice grenades and the plasma caster? Why didn't any of the other synths go out to secure the Yautja ship? And boy, wasn't it convenient for Deck's stupid little acid worm to think independently enough to sacrifice itself for him. Boy, isn't it convenient that Deck can actually breathe the air that's on this planet. Never mind previous examples of Predators needing to have some sort of air support to be able to breathe on the Earth. Now, all of this brings me to one other detail that I want to talk about, which is whether or not this movie is actually profitable. This is something that's driven me insane in the conversation around Badlands.
It broke records, therefore it's a huge success.
Well, first and foremost, Predator's never really been a highly successful franchise. So the bar's already incredibly low if we're being realistic. Second, as the population does continue to increase, there are inevitably going to be more people that go to movie theaters anyway, so just because the number is bigger now than it was then does not actually guarantee that it's anywhere near as successful proportionately. So let's break down some of these numbers. As so many of the media literacy crowd have gone extremely silent, it actually tells you quite a bit about Predator Badlands' performance. So Badlands has made $160 million globally. Again, I'm only counting the first 3 weeks. And that's against a $105 million production budget. Aha! That's a success, because one number is bigger than the other, the media literacy crowd who have no fucking brain cells in their head would say. And I would politely counter, hold your horses, retards, because budgets shown on IMDb or Wikipedia or any other thing like this are only production. In fact, you have to double or even triple the production budget to compensate for everything, including marketing and distribution, which are the only big 2 I will focus on right now, and that's not including everything else like licensing and other such fees. So, realistically, if we take that $105 million and double it to $210, well, we're already at quite the deficit. Except there's one more problem that has to be addressed, and that's the box office split. You see, on average, the box office is actually split 50% between the production studio and the theaters themselves. An oversimplification, yes, but it is an accurate rule of thumb. So in reality, it's not $210 million at the box office to break even, it's actually $420 million. So again, only at 3 weeks in, with $160 million globally, that means that it's currently at 50% split, meaning $80 million. Oh, look at that, it's actually $25 million under production budget alone. Hell, Hell, if I said it was only a 50% increase and not a total doubling of the budget at 157 in total, this movie still hasn't even made its budget back. How the fuck can any of you retards actually look at this movie and say mathematically it is objectively a success? This is a genuine lesson for any media literacy morons to actually take to heart. Just because a movie does well in its first week does not mean that it is going to hold that momentum. Yeah, every single one of you perforated douchebags who is riding on your high horse with a dildo for a saddle should probably ride on over to Critical Drinker's channel and say, you know what, we're sorry, we have no idea what we're talking about. And just to make sure everyone understands the numbers, let me put everything into perspective. If we do not account for inflation and assume the same rule of thumb that I applied for Badlands all the way back to the original, these are the numbers you get. This first row is all of the movies. The second row is the total budget in million. Each movie's global box office performance is the third row. The fourth row is the required box office for each one to at least break even. And the last row will be profits and losses. The only profitable movie in the franchise was the original, and the closest one, based on net loss, is surprisingly actually AVPR. And the biggest failure was obviously The Predator at a whopping $132.5 million. That is, until Predator Badlands came along and said, hold my diaper, I'm gonna shit all over that crown, and now currently, again, this is only 3 weeks in, is at a whopping $280 million loss. That is over double the loss of The Predator. So even if we assume that this movie stayed in theaters all the way until January, which it won't, the Christmas season is gonna knock it out of the theater, then you compare that to the performative drop-off from weeks 1 to 2 at almost 68%, and weeks 2 to 3 were almost as bad with an over 50% drop. Even if we stuck to the assumption that it ran all the way to January, it is objectively, empirically impossible for this movie to not only make money, but not be considered the biggest financial failure in the franchise. So where does it rank in the series? While I haven't seen Killer of Killers as of the making of this review, I would say that Badlands is definitively bottom 3. It's replaced Prey in the third place for worst, but it definitely stands above AVPR and The Predator. I think it's a fair comparison to Castlevania's Seasons 1 and 2 to best explain this. Season 1 tried to stay simple and focused, while Season 2 went overboard with way too many elements. Ultimately, it collapses under the weight, revealing the foundation that Jan Trachtenberg built all of these movies on from the beginning was never really solid. Badlands should have remained a simple, streamlined, and focused story. Applying tactics that are foreign to the Predator franchise do not help it, like excess CGI or cute side animals. So when tourists online claim that Badlands is one of, if not the best film in the franchise, they simply have no idea what they're talking about. Badlands has excessive amounts of CGI. The environments are sterile, everything is gray and heavily filtered over, it lacks any standout or memorable music, the world building lacks effort and commitment, it's timid and lacks the edge and primal energy the franchise is known for. No matter how many articles prop this movie up as some fun, light-hearted adventure, or others falsely claim it's a runaway success at theaters when the numbers disprove that. Audiences clearly crave the power and violence the franchise is known for, not a sci-fi D&D story with a malformed runt carrying a cripple with a pet monkey. And it worries me this is the guy who will probably helm the next AVP movie that's obviously in the pipeline. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's an Avengers-styled alliance between past survivors and this so-called clan as they stand against Deck's mother, an alien infestation, or another pred-alien hybrid of some sort. It'll be another mass-produced, off-the-assembly line, soulless piece of content that is virtually indistinguishable from modern Star Wars or MCU movies. And I'd really appreciate it if you would just put me out of my misery so I don't have to endure that when it comes out. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe to help build this kingdom. Head to my secondary channel, Balmorian Herald, for news and political commentary. Head to my tertiary channel, Balmorian Galaxy, for Battletech and Mech Warrior. And if you feel so inclined, then please donate to me on Subscribestar so I can continue to produce more content for all of you. I thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.